Hello, everybody. Welcome back to episode 10 of the JustUs Podcast. I'm here with my co-hosts, Tops26, and our tag team assistant, DC Eternal, who will usually be helping out with Evdog when he's not around.
Yep.
It'll just be the three of us for today, but hey, might as well get an episode out there instead of waiting for some sort of cliffhanger or whatever. Anyways, today we'll be talking about Transformers Earthrise, our favorite Quentin Tarantino moments, a revisit of Green Hornet, and our plans for 2021. Now, of course, let's go from left to right and talk about Earthrise. So, this cartoon is a sequel to the Siege cartoon that was on Netflix. It's season 2. It's a continuation. It's tied in with the Transformers toy line from the War for Cybertron series. And spoiler alert, I don't like it. I didn't like Siege, and I didn't like Earthrise. Now, I'm going to give a few positives to Earthrise, but you guys probably remember my thoughts on Siege, right?
Yeah, they were pretty detailed and consistent. Yes.
I will say that since we have so many characters that were already in Siege that showed up in Earthrise, I'll mostly focus on the new stuff or the stuff that's more significant in terms of character changes. So obviously Optimus Prime's a little more capable of an Autobot leader. He's not as reluctant, he's not as desperate, and he seems to be a little more confident with himself. Bumblebee's a little more friendly, Ratchet's a little more reliable. Megatron is still the same guy, but now he's with Galvatron, who is his future self because, well, obvious G1 stuff right there. And we'll get to Galvatron in a bit, but I have to say that when he showed up to meet Megatron, I was laughing out loud at how he showed up. Like, it was like trying to recreate the old movie scene when Galvatron was made. And it was like so desperate in trying to appeal to G1 fans. Like, it's sad.
Felt like a parody?
Yeah, like, I felt like a parody to me because it was just pretty much me thinking, you guys really want to make us masturbate to G1 references, huh? That's sad.
Yeah.
But yes, the characters we got from Siege aren't that different as they are in Earthrise, which is fine. In terms of the new characters, we've got the Mercenaries. We've got Double Dealer, who is a triple changer that can turn into either a Condor or an anti-aircraft missile launching truck, which is pretty cool if you ask me, but still kind of iffy on the rest of the Mercenaries because they're basically repaints. He's the only character in the faction that's a unique design. You've got Bugbite, who is pretty much a white Bumblebee, Exhaust, who is pretty much a Marlboro-themed Wheeljack repaint. If you guys know Marlboro, like, they don't say it, but he looks like the Marlboro branding. You know, the cigarettes?
Yeah, I think I know.
Yeah, that's pretty much the Exhaust sort of guy. He's basically Nebo Wheeljack. And you've got the Coneheads, who are pretty much the additional Seekers. Now, in most G1 media, they're additional allies of the Decepticons, but here they're mercenaries, which is fine. Although it's kind of funny how they have the Conehead designs, even though they never had that sort of appearance in any fiction until now. But whatever. So the mercenaries were fun to see. I liked Double Dealer. His voice was fine. It's the same as Impactor, but it makes more sense on him. And I like the fact that he was neither an Autobot or a Decepticon. Kind of like Lockdown in Age of Extinction, if you're familiar with him. Which I'm sure you guys might be because he's more recognizable.
Yeah.
And as for the other characters we got, there are the Quintessence, who are pretty much a multi-faced sort of judge. And you also have their own Transformers that serve them, basically, but they recolor the Ironhide designs. It's kind of funny. And the craziest thing about the Quintessence, which is called JustUs, by the way, which... You guys find that name kind of weird, JustUs?
Yeah, it is strange.
I mean, I remember a guy on Sabertron called it JustUs.
Yeah, you've been commenting that.
Yeah, I can only imagine in an alternate universe where the joke was made, or was relatively fresh. Optimus Prime would have probably asked him, like, "Hey, what's your name?" The quintessence would reveal itself by peeling off its faces. You get the These Nuts guy showing up, and he says the line, accompanied with, "Ah, got him!" Rest in peace, Vine.
Yeah.
Rest in peace.
Master class in writing. Excellent.
I wish I could say the same for Earthrise. But, yeah. Other characters that were new. I also got to mention that most Autobots stayed behind on Cybertron as well as the Decepticons before Project Nemesis was made, and the Decepticons thought it'd be great to go after the Autobots. The surprising thing is that some Decepticons, mainly Scrapface, wanted to help out the Autobots that were on Cybertron going up against Megs. And it's kind of cool. Like, it shows that not everyone is on Megatron's sort of point of view anymore. They don't agree with his actions. And it was great to see Elita 1 and her crew go up against Megatron before he left. All the Decepticons went after the Autobots, who were on their quest for the Allspark. They encountered Galvatron from the Dead Universe, and is the servant of Unicron. Now, you guys might be familiar with the fact that Megatron and Galvatron are the same character, right?
Yup.
Of course, since this is a G1-based piece of fiction, they made sure that Galvatron mentions that he is his servant of Unicron, and basically a future Megatron, which, it's kind of neat that they do something like that. But like I said, it's kind of funny when they showed him off, appearing in front of Megatron, how they tried so hard to mimic his appearance in the movie when he was reformatted. Like, it was, we get it. This is a G1 sort of piece of fiction. The one thing that surprised me the most was that at the end of the series, we've got a special character that's not from G1, but is from its sequel of sorts, Beast Wars. And can you guess who showed up in that scene?
We did.
If you guessed Dinobot, you're correct. Dinobot didn't transform into his robot mode, but he did witness from his eye in beast mode that the Ark crash landed at the end of the series. Now, it's too early to speculate if the CGI in this show would be any better than the CGI from Beast Wars, because Beast Wars was a very, very dated show in terms of CGI, but it still holds up in terms of its attempts at facial expressions as well as character movement. Not as good as Prime, but still better than Energon and Cybertron, if you ask me.
Okay. That's interesting.
Another positive I gotta say is the fact that at least in this show, they mostly diverse the settings. I mean, we go from different ships to different sorts of areas that are mostly open field. I mean, you got yourself a arena for Megatron and his cons, where the Autobots are fighting against him. You got the Quintessence Lair. You've got the Ark, the Nemesis, Fool's Fortune. You even got the Dead Universe, which has a pretty snowy environment, if you ask me. It's just kind of chilly. And you might think it might have been on Earth, but it's actually meant to show off Nemesis Prime, who only shows up for 10 seconds and kind of looks derpy in his close-up with his optics glowing red. So, yeah. Those are the positives I have to say with Earthrise. It's got more things I like from it than Siege, but that doesn't mean it's a 100% better show. I'll give credit that it tried to be different from Siege in terms of it feeling more expansive, a little more adventurous, whereas Siege was mostly content with characters just standing around, moving around like action figures in CGI, and then fighting in the same sort of murky environments where they shoot around and feel sort of, I don't know what the term is, but if you ever see a more amateur stop motion, which may or may not be the case for mine if I ever do videos like that, you might feel
like the movement doesn't look like it's like animated film, that would be like 24 frames per second.
Not really
Like
24
a-
frames per second, but I'm saying is that, like, the character movement just feels a little too, like, doesn't feel refined. Almost like it's trying
Yeah,
to
right,
animate.
like clean, like in 3D animation, like that, right?
Well, if you ever
In
seen
that kind of way.
like if you've seen Transformers Prime's animation, whether it's from an entire episode or from a clip, the animation in
Yeah.
that show is pretty smooth. And I think it has to do with the fact that character models are made specifically to animate in certain ways, as well as obviously the animation studio behind the show being a little more careful. Like, sure, it's a more expensive show than Earthrise, but it's kind of sucky how this is the same animation studio that made Prime, and we go from Prime looking very good, almost Clone Wars level of good, or Green Lantern, the animated series, good. I even say Beware the Batman good sort of animation, to this, which tries to look dark and gritty, but ends up being kind of shitty.
So I'm not that familiar with bad animations of those sorts, but I get it. Yeah.
Well, I'll say this: that I'm pretty sure you've seen the Clone Wars regularly, right?
Oh yeah.
Like, that's the sort of animation that Transformers Prime has. It's very nice and fluid, whereas this feels more like a more advanced version of Energon's animation, which is pretty bad.
Okay.
And in terms of other negatives I have, once again, the pacing feels pretty slow. And it's even worse when you have Megatron and Galvatron talking to each other, with Megatron already being slow in Siege, but now you add Galvatron, and it's almost like two guys are arguing over who should reach for the remote. Except it's two guys arguing over what should be done with the Matrix.
Oh, much more intense.
Yeah, like, by much more intense, I'm pretty sure you mean by 10% more intense.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, and also got to mention that we've got Skylynx and Scorponok, which Skylynx, for those unaware, is a transformer that turns into a space shuttle that can split into a dinosaur bird and a lion before the two combine into a dinosaur bird with a lion's legs, which is pretty awesome. And then the Scorponok, which pretty much...
sick. Just hearing that detail, that's pretty cool.
Yeah.
Yeah, man. That's what I like about... Yep. But as for Scorponok, he's pretty much a giant scorpion, and he turns into a giant robot. He doesn't turn into a city, though. In fact, I think he's much smaller than he should be in terms of the size. But I did like seeing Optimus Prime attempt to ride him before getting stung by his tail. Like, there are some things I did enjoy about Earthrise. Even seeing the Autobots and Decepticons working together in some capacity before the Decepticons think, you know what, we're going to take away your Matrix. And as far as it turned out, it was kind of, like, not perfect, but still much better done than you would expect.
What were you thinking? Like, do you think it follows, like, from some of your expectations that you thought, or any expectations you thought when you started watching the show?
Yeah, like, it surprised me on some capacity. Like, it was fine, but, like, it was not as bad as I thought it was going to be, but still not perfect. I have to say that when it comes to the approach in being a sequel to Siege, it succeeds in being better in some areas. Because Earthrise has some things I do like, but that doesn't mean it's 100% better. My biggest problem is the fact that, once again, the pacing is just as poor, the animation is no better. I mean, I guess I can't complain too much, because if it was suddenly much more consistent or much more fluid, it'd make Siege stand out poorly. Plus, you wouldn't have too many of these sort of expectations on Rooster Teeth or Netflix or modern Transformers shows anyways, so that's thrown out the window. The big problem I do have is the fact that it tries so hard to make the G1 references prominent, and it makes me kind of like roll my eyes a bit more than I should when it comes to them referencing, stuff like the 86 movie with Galvatron or The Lines, and the fact that the Decepticons would pretty much get involved with stealing the Matrix, or the fact that the ships crash into Earth. And of course, there is even scenes from the cartoon that were pretty much blurred out but show off the future that Optimus Prime witnessed, or whoever it was. Like, doesn't it seem a little too much when you get like all those references in one go?
Right. I mean, because I'm pretty sure that would just be overdoing in the sense of fan service, then, right? Like getting in the show.
Yes, like I get fan service is important for people, so we can get all those online websites to talk about the top 10 lists. Like, I pretty much expect them to be like, hey guys, here's top 10 references to this Transformers show. It's based on the cartoon you grew up with and that we totally grew up with. It's like, shut up about it. My god, it's already bad enough that we got Studio Series trying to put in G1 movie characters, while the Kingdom line has the Beast Wars characters, which are far more important to me. Now we gotta have nothing but all these references thrown in, and it's just, like, getting tiresome.
Right.
And it makes me miss when, like, in 2010, we had War for Cybertron, the video game, which is a better War for Cybertron than this. Like, the video game was, like, a version of G1. Like, it's in a different universe.
I remember how it was. Yeah. Because I was really trying to get to like how the game portrayed from the story during like from the Battle of Cybertron. I mean, in the Transformers Cybertron series. Because I know those two games. I forgot what the other one was. But I know one was War over Cybertron.
Yes, those two games are. Well, I'll talk about them the next time we do an episode that involves Transformers. Spoiler alert, February. But like those, like that War for Cybertron is not in the same universe as G1. It's part of the same universe as Prime and Rescue Bots and Robots in Disguise 2015. Somehow, I don't know how it works, but like it's just the storytelling, not the character designs that dictate it.
I mean, like just as long as they, or like some of the storytellers even said that was canon, and somehow they were able to make a connectivity between from the game and then from the two shows. So like if they were able to make it work, I mean, if they expanded it and somehow in the future, if they could show that really brings that connection through it, then
I'm afraid it's too late for that.
Becomes a lot more, I guess, like appropriate.
I'm afraid it's too late for that because the Allied universe is over, which is a topic for another day. But I'll say this, like, back in 2010, the G1, like, nostalgia appeal was not in your face. Like, it was cool to learn about Transformers. Like, I was excited to learn about the cartoon and Beast Wars and everything that came out before the movies and animated and Prime. I love the War for Cybertron game because it felt like a cool modern approach. It's kind of like the equivalent to Doom Eternal, the game that came out in 2020.
And since like with the new Doom series with both games, I mean, like, they made sure to keep true from the original without either trying to exploit or put too much of what was already remembered in the gameplay wise, and they just added in a lot of the modern touch when it comes to this sense of how the detail environment was coming through the gameplay, of how the slash and goriness of it became some of the most highly appraised recent games throughout the 2010s, or just even recent video game like era, like that.
Yeah, like that's how you sum up Doom Eternal. But when I compare Doom Eternal to War for Cybertron, the game, it's because like both of them know how to be like modern takes of something that's familiar, but without trying to make you feel too alienated for not even being aware of the past. Whereas the Earthrise and the War for Cybertron cartoon on Netflix keeps on reminding you that it's G1, it's G1, it's G1. And if you don't like G1, then what are you doing here?
The era of G1 is too put on, right?
Yeah, like they just like shove it down your throat. And it's always funny to me. Like, I understand it's meant for, like, the nostalgia-catered people. It's meant for the people that look up on Facebook and find these cool posts of awesome anime-style G1 artwork and posts that say nothing beats the original and all that sort of shit. I get it. But as someone that's seen more and better from Transformers, like Transformers Prime, Dark of the Moon, Animated, Beast Wars, the Marvel Comics, and I hate to sound like those nerds that'd be like, how would you do it like that? Like, what the hell, man? This sucks. Worst cartoon ever. Like the comic book guy from The Simpsons. But like, it's just so annoying to have to deal with like this fucking nostalgia.
I mean, like we expect many of the most iconic either video game or film franchise or even show franchises that have brought such an impact. Like we can expect that it'll just be an over adding, just like too much of a touch of the nostalgia put in for the sake of like fan service with what they're trying to do. At this point, some of those kind of franchises are going to keep resisting from the sake of adding too much of the nostalgia, like how G1 has put too much of Earthrise.
Yeah.
But even so, we've seen that experience for either Star Wars with like we were talking about, but we know how too much they've put in for how much the original trilogy that they wanted to bring into the new movies, but yet that just doesn't make it any more better. So in the same case for Transformers, it's just now on that level of annoyance because of how it just takes away what.
Yeah, it takes away from what could be a unique experience. And like I get that this is a version of G1. Like this is like the War for Cybertron cartoon is a version of G1 like the Marvel comics are, and the old cartoon from Sunbow, and the Dreamwave comics, and the IDW comics. But like this sort of mindset of made by fans and for fans kind of like shows me why I'm hesitant on giving attention to new Transformers stuff if it's going to appeal to a specific group. If we're not going to get much out of new stuff that would appeal to anybody new to the franchise without trying to appeal to a specific fan base that only care about a version of a series anyways. And that's why I've been kind of happy with Cyberverse. Like, it's not a perfect series, but it doesn't try to be like G1 too much. Like, I thought it was going to be like more like a Johnny Testified G1 series, but it's not. It's actually got some new stuff in it. I like the inclusion of Windblade and Bumblebee as friends. I like that Hot Rod wasn't trying to be like how he was in the movie. I like that we got uncommon characters like Cheetor, Skybite, and Lockdown in the series. Like, it's pretty nice. And the fan service elements, while they're there, aren't required for an Easter egg website to try and put in. I just want to focus on the story and then be surprised when I look at the Easter eggs myself instead of having a YouTube site from like a nerd site that's mostly interested in like pretty much talking about Marvel and DC stuff, and by that stuff I mean just the movies, instead of learning more about Transformer stuff, because all they think about is just G1 and pretending to act like they know about Transformers when there's just one version, or two if you count the Michael Bay movies.
G1, it'll be just the most commonly seen like face front idea of what Transformers is like.
Yeah.
Which I won't like, because I've been having that same idea with the thought of Transformers, because I mostly like how long we're growing up with the shows for like Transformers Prime, and then of course with the Bayverse for Transformers, but like there was a lot more even before like that I want to see before, like with the original G1 show, which I never got to like get much of a chance for, even though I've seen only some episodes from TV just regularly. But like I know how much the influence is and how like well put and like original and iconic just that series was of the golden era of animation for any TV show within the time. But still, it's just now going to be the most dependent on, and I guess like how you explain it in the sense for the War for Cybertron series.
Yeah, it's like pump the brakes, Hasbro. Like, I'm already happy enough with buying your action figures from the War for Cybertron line, and I do want to give Kingdom a shot because we finally have Beast Wars characters. But it's like, come on, son. Honestly, it makes me wish when we used to have like all these, like when the movies felt like their own thing, when the cartoons felt like its own thing, and when the comics were their own thing, and even the video games felt like their own thing too. So it's kind of sucky that we had to deal with, like nowadays, like starting in 2018, we've got War for Cybertron, which is just like nitty gritty G1, but not done right. Cyberverse, which is sort of like G1, but feels more like a light version of it, but still decent. And the Michael Bay movies now turning into the Bumblebee style movies, which many people being like, it's the best thing ever. But I just think, fuck no. That's a story for another day.
I mean, like, yeah.
So I'll say this, that when it comes to Earthrise, it's fine. It's not 100% better than Siege, because there's still some things from Siege that are carried over that frustrated me, and I have been pretty negative on Siege anyway, so I'll say that Earthrise is an improvement. I'm going to give Earthrise a 6 out of 10.
I mean, still pretty fair rating, especially with your explanation in the case. And like, there was a lot like hype from some of the Transformers community that I've seen either throughout IG or Twitter, but like I didn't even have much of it interest from seeing it, especially with it being a Netflix show. But I mean, there's a lot of thought now that I have since you explained with.
Yeah, like,
with
you can pretty much like whatever you want, but my point is that I miss when Transformers used to have different meanings for each franchise.
Interesting.
Kind of like how I miss when Power Rangers wasn't so reliant on just Mighty Morphin. Mighty Morphin
now
is...
pretty much those meanings.
And, already talking about Beast Morphers, and I thought that was a decent season. But we're going to go back to 2011 with Samurai, which felt like a downgrade from RPM, as well as everything else that came before it. But, yeah, Earthrise, you're better, but not that much better. Next up, we'll be talking about Quentin Tarantino and the things we like about him. Now, this guy, this lovable bastard, has been quite remarkable for his films and even some of the stuff he's been involved with. Now, what's your favorite thing about Quentin Tarantino?
Like I was saying, I mean, for Quentin, like all the most iconic, like well-known directors in the game for Hollywood, like his way is just so unique, and the style of how it's always a nice refresher from like different kind of like you see something that from a very classic genre, either if it's a Western, if it's like a old cop drama, or if it's anything like comes out as comedic or something that's just in such special ways that he adds Quentin adds like style when it comes to either how he gets the shots, also how he keeps his characters tuned and how well written they are to bring a lot of the uniqueness from them. Like in that sense, that's what makes him like quite special from what he's done throughout his career. That's just my thoughts I would have of him.
What I like about Quentin Tarantino is that he's sort of like the kind of guy that doesn't give a crap about the smallest complaint that a normie would think about him. Kind of like with Michael Bay and Zack Snyder and Christopher Nolan. Like, he's his own guy. Like, he's not like the normies director. He's not Mr. Committee. He's Quentin motherfucking Tarantino. And that's all that matters. That's the bottom line. That's something else you need to say about like what he's specifically made for. He is his own man. And that's something we miss nowadays when it comes to movie directors.
Yeah.
If there's one thing I kind of find amusing, it's the fact that most people use him. Like, you know how most YouTubers, not us technically, try to review Quentin Tarantino and make like these sorts of complex discussions, which isn't a bad thing because like this guy can make movies or has made movies and did make movies on the same level as someone like Stanley Kubrick. Or is it Kubrick? Kubrick? Anyways, how you doing, Stan Lee? Anyways, this guy is very, like, unique in terms of how he makes his movies. And considering the fact that most people are pretty much mentioning the obvious when it comes to reviewing his films, especially the likes of Pulp Fiction, what I like about him is that he's not pretty much someone that you'd easily describe. Because Quentin Tarantino's approach in making films is like his own. It's like his own trademark, and his directing style is almost like his own baby in a way. What I also like about him is the fact that his like personality is even like fits in well with his directing approach. Remember that time when he told an interviewer that he rejects their hypothesis?
Yeah, wasn't that like from his interview for the Django?
Could be. Like, I mostly remember the quote. I was thinking to myself, like, this guy just doesn't care about what the average person would say.
Yeah. Okay. I mean, because I remember how, like, in the interviews, like, how, like, he would be questioned on, certain takes or, like, thoughts on how he executes from, like, scenes that he does, like, especially for, like, the Django, right? Because, like, what people were making controversial so much about. Yeah, often like I know reviews, but even though he's been known for like having some kind of like touch of the dark humor that he would put in most of films, like how Glorious Bastards was or The Hateful Eight, and even though he still keeps that same touch, but like he doesn't try to go overboard, but he tries to make sure that it still honors whichever era or whichever setting that was from the films that he's making. So, like, really keeping, like I said, his own style, like, but really put in to also make sure the setting is kept in ways accurate, but also not too much to a point where it just feels too fictional or too kind of inorganic in a way for how he writes his films.
Right. Like, make it feel natural. Make it feel smooth.
Yeah. Exactly, yeah. That's why I sometimes think if I ever watch a movie from him.
It seemed like the thing I find most amusing is the fact that I remember in an interview from Django Unchained, like this isn't technically his interview, but when Samuel L. Jackson was interviewed, he told the interviewer, who I think looked like someone you'd expect from Modern Day Collider or Variety or whatever, to like say the N-word. And considering that the interviewers are like a white guy, I was thinking to myself like that's solely like a sort of satire that you'd expect Quentin to make, because like he's like someone that doesn't pull back. Meaning, sure, he doesn't like go all the way in when it comes to his approach in directing, but it feels, like I said, feels natural, feels smooth, compared to someone that half-asses it or goes too far with an approach in style.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I mean, in a way, that's how he tries to keep his approach well, but like he tries to not, like, yes, I'll take him away just for bringing like the type of generic filmmaking you see from a certain film that he do. He made sure that touch is kept well. Even though like how he does like some a lot of cameos just from himself to just make sure that just add to the idea of how his presence is so much there that he would just have a featured role or a part in the story that he just made for himself. So his cameo is like similar to an example of that.
Yeah. I'm sure some will compare it to Stan Lee's cameo in Marvel movies, or John Ratzenberger's frequent reappearances in Pixar films, but the thing is that you expect those to be there, whereas with Quentin, I don't get the feeling that it's obvious where he's going to pop up. And that's okay, because I like it when movies don't really have much of a gimmick. The only gimmick is the story or the setting.
Yeah.
And of course, there are many moments from Quentin Tarantino films that are recognizable, whether it's the siren theme from Kill Bill, which I'm sure you might have heard on YouTube way back then. You know the one, right?
What was the siren theme?
From Kill Bill, the one that goes like, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, like, that's one you've heard in like YouTube videos, especially YTPs, but like it feels like something you'd expect Quentin to make, because like it just fits with that sort of spirit.
Yeah. In a way, especially with how well Kill Bill was like those always just some of the smallest moments that really give like a kind of defining sense of for how Quentin was like in his filmmaking time, just even from back in the 90s, which Kill Bill was at with Volume 1, but like he just was at such a prime. Like if I was thinking of his prime time for from his films, it would be from 90s and 2000s.
How come you don't feel the same way with the 2010s?
No. I was gonna say after too. Like he still brings like that strong sense like he's done with the 2010s for Django, Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. It doesn't even lack off like and even also Bang Play. It's just that when it comes to like knowing how well you was able to bring the most like iconic like moments when it comes to the characters, when it comes to like the story that came out of what he's done with his screenplays, because like he's more like appreciated in the sense of being a screenplay writer, with those being a director, because his screenplays came out so like well in tune, and that everyone's just had a lot of memories for how well known, how popular it was from the 90s and 2000s. Compared to 2010, which 2010 is recently loved, but like it's close to, in my style, it's still similar to like how it was with Glorious Bastards, and like how it falls in that case when he came from filmmaking, but he still holds up even from 2010, but like each one from each 10 that falls through the eras 90s, 2010, what I'm saying, he still holds up well. It's just that like in some way it doesn't come off as how strong as some people have remembered from back then. If they compare Pulp Fiction to Once Upon a Time, and they think about how which film would you consider the most iconic and the most appreciated in the sense of filmmaking as from what Quentin done from both times. People will most often say Pulp Fiction.
Yeah, especially considering the fact that Samuel L. Jackson's role in the film was pretty much a standout. I mean, most people already know like the line, say what again? I dare you, I double dare you, motherfucker. Say what again? Like that line stands out immensely. And it definitely feels like something
it's so sad. Like even from like other shows that try and make a little reference, or just like a little hint of it, it's still being quoted from anyone that you if they think about films, just think about.
Yeah, like it feels like something that like it's iconic, whether it's parodied or referenced or like repeated again by the actor. I agree with you. Because like Once Upon a Time in Hollywood just feels fresh in our memories, whereas something like Pulp Fiction feels like it's been around for so long, especially when you consider the fact that it's got plenty of YouTube clips or having it show up on magazines that talk about the top 100 quotes. of all time in Hollywood. Why they're the best. But you know something that sort of stood out to me? I remember one of the Kill Bill movies when one of the characters, like the lead character, his name is like, I hate to be like the sort of guy that like forgets about, main characters. Like people complain about like the female character, like the way she's depicted in Kicking Ass. But like, I think he called out a lot of critics for like questioning it because like this is a female protagonist that is kicking ass. It's kind of funny how most people like try to like keep their nose up at something like that because like people are always begging about female um, like female power or like girl power and all that sort of stuff. Especially nowadays when they pretty much try to like force companies that they wouldn't even support anyways, like Marvel and Star Wars, into doing that sort of thing. But they lost their shit over it with Kill Bill. I mean, like it's not a movie that's made for little girls. This is like an adult film. I mean, there's like no Barbie doll that's named after Kill Bill unless it's like some sort of parody by a fan, right?
Yeah.
So the way he responded to it was just pretty much like I just like found it funny because many people try to go after like companies for not doing enough female representation or like giving females strong lead characters, and apparently that's like not good. Maybe it's not as good as like Sarah Connor from Terminator 2, who is pretty cool, or like Princess Leia from Star Wars, or any sort of character you'd expect someone to mention in their YouTube channel or in a magazine regarding film, blah, blah, blah. But I just think that even if it's not as good as how people saw it with other female characters, still better than how people would view, like, or people would force some sort of like Mary Sue nowadays in fiction.
Yeah, they thought that.
That being said, though, I know for a fact that Quentin Tarantino has not done a movie for like a big franchise. As far as we know, his stuff is pretty much unique. It's his own trademark. Like all his films are like his children. But I remember people saying that he's supposed to make a Star Trek film. Is that still happening?
I never even heard of that till now.
Yeah,
But it's actually true.
like I don't know at this point. Like it just seems so weird. Like you got this guy who's known to make films that feel like his own creation, his own ideas, whether it's Pulp Fiction or Glorious Bastards or Hateful Eight or whatever. And then you've got something that's made for nerds, basically. Like Star Trek. While it doesn't feel like something I'd be interested in, I don't think it would also fit him any better either because, like, Star Trek doesn't really scream potential for Quentin Tarantino. Maybe it might be like a more like tense Star Trek, but would it really work?
I mean, if you compare just the words Star Trek and Quentin Tarantino, no one in their right mind, or even mess mind, would think that will go right.
Yeah, like Quentin Tarantino and Stanley Kubrick, they make sense because of their names. Like they feel like they belong. Whereas Star Trek feels more like when people on Twitter try to make like a parody of a movie, but with something that's more mass appeal. You know, how, like people like replace, like putting like a Batman face over a character that's got nothing to do with Batman on like a Twitter post.
Yeah. I see that sometimes, I think.
Yeah, like that's the feeling I get from a Quentin Tarantino Star Trek film. Now, maybe I can see him doing a movie about the behind the scenes stuff on Star Trek, which I don't think was that controversial or that recognizable. but it'd be kind of interesting to see him do like you know how we got a movie about The Room, or more specifically the behind the scenes of The Room with disaster artists, right?
Yeah.
That's what I can imagine for Quentin Tarantino to make, because maybe we'd get more of the sort of tense moments from filming Star Trek, because I don't think Star Trek was that like
How that was like.
yeah, like I don't think Star Trek was that easy to film back then. I mean, to us nowadays, it looks like it's typical beep boop control panels with characters that act as stiff as a boner. But the thing,
Yeah.
but behind the scenes, it might have been a pain in the ass for all the actors to get on schedule. Now I'm thinking about it. I want to know if Star Trek was actually like hell to film back then. Maybe it wasn't. Because when you have a big franchise that's new to this sort of thing, I honestly expect it to be a bit more challenging to film. Which now I want to learn about. I'm honestly more interested in learning about how Quentin Tarantino can bring light into how they made Star Trek than for him to make a movie about Star Trek stories. Isn't that weird?
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure people are going to say it's going to be like Disaster Artist, but I don't care. I want to learn about how he did this sort of thing. And hey, it'd be kind of refreshing because I'm not a Star Trek guy, but I want to learn about how they make the show because, hell, if I know anything about Star Trek, but hey, I want to learn about the reactions and maybe even some comparisons to the behind the scenes, the Q&As and all that sort of thing.
Yeah, and that'd be interesting enough to even just think of how the type of process Quentin would do, even for just one scene. He's not meant for working with anything that falls in the sci-fi genre of filmmaking.
Yeah, but that's okay. He doesn't have to be in a sci-fi movie or a comic book movie to be my favorite guy. I like him the way he is.
He does.
I don't need him to be involved with Star Wars or Star Trek or Marvel or DC or Battlestar Galactica or whatever the hell there is. I want Quentin Tarantino to be Quentin Tarantino.
Exactly. Not Quentin Tarantino trying to be someone else.
Yeah. So in terms of our final verdict, a 10 out of 10, basically.
Quentin, you always will be a 10 out of 10, simple as that.
Yeah. And you don't have to be involved with all that nerd shit. Just do your own thing. Who needs Quentin Tarantino to do a Batman movie or Star Wars movie? I don't. I want to see your own ideas. Next up, we'll be talking about Green Hornet. Okay, this film is not particularly remembered by many, but I have it in my head because it's something I've seen back in 2011. Now, what is one thing you remember about Green Hornet, whether it's this movie or the TV show that was inspired by it, which is kind of like the 60s Batman in some ways, but maybe not as campy?
I don't really have, I'll say straight, I don't really have, the clearest idea from, I know Green Hornet follows from DC Comics, but, as a whole, in case of just the story behind it and some of the characters, I get, how you say, it's pretty similar to the 60s Batman show, and, this is also not too campy, but, from the show itself, what I've seen from old footage, this all looks pretty close to Adam West. I like that. But the movie, I just remember just how fun it was watching. And when it comes to my sense of humor, being younger, I remember watching in theaters, I think 2011. So I was pretty much 10 years old from that time. And I wasn't allowed because it was pretty sure it was rated R or PG-13 for whatever the ratings were from my theater, but
pretty sure it was.
It was pretty fun.
Now, I'm going to say this. The Green Hornet is not from DC.
Oh, it wasn't?
No, he's not. You might be thinking of the Green Arrow, but, Yeah, this guy's his own character. Like, remember back then when comic book characters weren't just from Marvel or DC? I mean, sure, we have Google search results that ask people like, is is Mr. Google is Spawn DC because he looks so dark? And is Batman Marvel? Like, that's what we got. But like, this guy currently is from Dynamic Entertainment, which is a more niche comic strip, like comic company, like not as big as Marvel or DC, but I don't think even as big as Image Comics or
You're right.
like whatever company hosts McFarlane stuff like Spawn, but like it's got its own recognition. Let's put it that way.
Right.
But what I like about the movie is the fact that it feels like a more modern version of the Green Hornet show. Now, it's hard to describe what makes it work because unlike Batman or Spider-Man or Superman, there is no established sort of nostalgia for Green Hornet. Like, it's very niche. Whereas all these other companies have had, or franchises have had, previous versions that are very distinct. Now, some I do like quite a bit, like Michael Keaton Batman, and of course, Sam Raimi Spider-Man, and some I don't give a shit about, like Christopher Reeve Superman. But Green Hornet, despite having like some past fiction, is not as big as those. So talking about the movie definitely makes it interesting.
And because, since knowing how the show was, well remembered in a sense, only remembering how similar from the era of some superhero shows coming from the time was, like the Bat, or just the Batman, as it's called, Adam West.
Yeah.
And then the Incredible Hulk, Lou Ferrigno.
Yep.
And then Spider-Man series. But yeah, the Green Hornet doesn't hold up to all of them. Like that. Now it's just remember, it's not from Marvel DC. So from it being a whole independent series, it doesn't follow well. But from the Green Hornet itself, from the movie with Seth Rogen, that's pretty much holds a lot more than what the original series had kept on. Like when it comes to the level of remembrance, but it still falls on a cliche comedy that you would expect a Seth Rogen like movie to be in. I mean, I have plans trying to watch it back, but I don't know if it's on Netflix or anything. I'm sure I can just try and get a DVD of it if I ever go back shopping, but it's been years watching it again.
Yeah. But like, the thing I like most about it is the fact that it kind of, as mentioned previously, feels like a modern version, but the thing that got me interested in the movie was the fact that the main character, Britt Raid, is kind of like against his dad. And when he and his friend decided to like basically fuck up the statue, I keep trying to forget the word, like, I like basically like
Vandalize?
Yeah. Why is it so hard? Let me try that again. What I like most about the movie was when they have the characters meet each other, Britt and Kato, they thought about vandalizing the statue.
Yeah.
And that was kind of like hilarious, but also pretty cool because most of the time, like most characters just like think of, I gotta make a costume, I gotta like use these powers to make a costume and make my identity. Like these guys decided to pretty much make themselves vigilantes from being like confused for either heroes or villains. Like they look like criminals, obviously. I mean, they wear the domino masks. They look like they're part of the mafia, but like it's so distinct, and it's very like underrated. I mean, we live in a time period most people are used to like big logos from Marvel and DC, mostly Marvel, having to wait for like the same sort of backstory. And I love what the Green Hornet did in making a unique backstory for the characters. Like it's not just, hey, let's save the day and be good guys. It was mostly just, hey, they call us thugs just because we vandalized the guy's statue. Let's be our own team, and that was like pretty cool.
Yeah, same thought, because it pretty much they try not to like follow like so similar, especially because since it was in 2011, right? And that was within the time of how the rise of the MCU was pretty much coming up. Because that same year, I mean that we can know, Thor and the first Captain America came out from that same year, right?
Yeah.
And then when it comes to DC, from their case, it was the Green Lantern movie, which many people remember, or at least try not to remember.
Yeah.
But they still pretty much understand how the same.
Yeah.
Like when it comes to the Green Hornet, it still follows up within those movies because each film is unique. Besides just the first two with Thor and the Cap, right? But with Green Hornet coming from the year, it pretty much makes it a lot more funner from 2011, thinking how well the time of superheroes was really coming into play.
Like, of course, I'm going to talk about, since you mentioned it, I want to talk about, I feel like talking about Captain America, the First Avenger, Thor, and Green Lantern later in the year. Spoiler alert.
Oh yeah.
We'll talk about that much later.
Try to.
Yeah, like, you're correct. Like, I appreciate the fact that Green Hornet was made around the right time. You know, like, most people are just going to be thinking to themselves, like, is this movie going to be in Marvel or DC? But back then, all we cared about was just, like, seeing movies. There was no brand, like, loyalty. All we just cared about was just seeing great stories. Now, whether or not they were great was one thing. But if I can be thankful for something, it was the fact that I was not exposed to the ugly-ass online forums of people bitching about what did and didn't work.
Yeah. And because even also, I just want to say from the same case with, in the year of 2011 with movies, like I'm happy enough that it didn't even, like this movie didn't came even recently or anything from like later from 2010, like 20, maybe like 2014 to now, right? Because that time superhero movies came up way more greater and bigger, right? 2013, the start of the DCEU. And then continuing on every other movie that came through since. And the MCU, we've seen how bigger that was starting to rise from its first few phases. And then seeing how more bigger and more aware the world was starting to get, knowing how much more popular like the superhero franchises were already growing in. So if Green Hornet was to come out from that later time, that would just be extremely ignored compared to how we already know it now.
But like, if there's one thing you can appreciate about the Green Hornet movie is like the approach of the duo, the Hornet and Kato. Like, of course, like people like we already know for a fact that people think that Brit Raid and the Green Hornet are two separate guys. It wasn't until Lenore found out about it. And honestly, when I think of the Lenore, I think of like the lady from King of the Hill that was that Bill fell in love with. So that's like lore cuts right there. Lenore, the female tritagonist of the film, and she kind of reminds me of like the same Lenore character from King of the Hill, as I mentioned. Lenore,
yeah.
Damn it, Bill. But yeah, like it's definitely got the typical stuff you'd expect, especially from like a really low-budget Batman film made by Columbia Pictures instead of DC. It feels like trying to be like the 60s, but with more like adult stuff. It was PG-13 as far as I can tell, but I like the approach of the characters, you know. I like that Kato was kind of like upset that he and Britt don't see each other eye to eye sometimes. But when they got to get along again, I like the fact that to hide the identities from everyone else aside from Lenore, like, he pretended to have shot Britt at the end of the movie so that they can hide the fact that they're two separate guys, Britt and the Hornet, so he can get treated properly and no one would assume that they're, like, that this billionaire is a superhero.
Yeah, it doesn't leave off too much of a, like bad identity or just convincing of how they were
in the portrayal as heroes, but they still, even from just their first few days, getting into the business of fighting crime, they came up really well.
Yeah, and that's something you don't really get with Batman and Robin. I mean, first of all, obviously they don't use guns, but not even the 1960s versions. I know that Batman tried to pretend that he's Bruce Wayne and Batman at the same time in a phone call with the commissioner or whoever it was.
Oh yeah. Every time the commissioner calls from the bat phone, the red phone, and then he will always have to switch often. I mean, it shows range for Adam and the kids about how he kept from both Bruce and Batman from either or for just a few minutes, compared to how he would have to split from conversations for if it was, for example, at a party, at a gal or whatever is Bruce, and then it's someone's about to call him, if I commissioner also, then imagine the time he had to take just to prep and then become Batman after. And then for Adam to switch back and forth, that would be pretty much annoying.
Yeah. But he pulled it off pretty well. And we're spoiled now with whether it's Michael Keaton lowering his voice to sound tough, or Christian Bale having throat cancer, or Ben Affleck having a vocoder. That's all cool. But I gotta give respect to Adam West for being trying to keep himself from trying to change his voice too much. I mean, I think as Batman, he sounded a little more smooth. It's weird to describe his character's voice, but beyond the fact that it's Adam West.
I mean, it shows how special even Adam's Batman had hold up compared to even just the most recent one, because the most recent Batman, besides that, just kept a lot of cleanness for the difference between changing the persona for either Bruce or for the Batman. But it has Adam for sure still hold it up even when you see just small moments during filming. So it's really keeps it well when you try to make a comparison between the heroes.
Yep. And before this turns into a Batman 66 review, which more on that later. Going back to
it's still kept pretty well also.
Just to sum up, Green Hornet maybe not be everyone's favorite movie ever. It's not my top one, but it's very underrated if you ask me. It feels like a modern day take on the 60s style of movies. And in the time, we have stuff like Earthrise, which tries to be super obsessed with the nostalgia. We have shit like Wonder Woman 1984, which tries to make itself feel appealing to the Linda Carter fans, who would only support the film if Zack Snyder's not involved. And this feels like a nice homage to the past without trying to be too gimmicky. Kind of like how, again, obvious reference or example, how Power Rangers Dino Thunder felt like a nice homage to Mighty Morphin without going on the same level that Samurai or Megaforce did, or just felt like Mighty Morphin 2.0 for wrong reasons.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm going to give the Green Hornet movie a 7.5 out of 10. Sure, it may not seem like a big movie.
I remember as a kid watching the film, I give it probably an 8 or 9. I just remember really having a lot of fun of how well that's comedy. His comedic timing, just in general, is so well in the movies, but even for what he did as the Green Hornet was pretty fun with Brian and Caleb. And it's by far probably the best moment, or just the best moment in general that you would consider from watching Green Hornet was seeing Kale make his signature. I think it was the signature latte, right?
Yeah.
Because it wasn't in the movie that he had an assistant and then he fired him. And because when Kale comes and taking the job, becoming his driver, his personal driver,
yeah,
he makes a special latte and then he has that little design of the leaf.
Right. But stuff like this, but beyond that stuff, just makes Green Hornet feel like an underrated gem. We're in a time period where we have nothing but cinematic universes and Easter eggs and spin-offs and sequels and crossovers and whatever. And I just love something like this. Like this and Hellboy, the first two movies by Guillermo del Toro were great. Like I like Hellboy more because it just feels more complete. It just feels a little like undercooked in some capacity because of like the content it has. But like, if you were to tell me that if I was to choose between like something like Peacemaker or whatever Disney Plus has for Baby Groot and the like, and stuff like this with Hellboy and Green Hornet, I'd go with Hellboy and Green Hornet because like we don't get stuff like this anymore. And I just
I know. We fought the touch for films that really got something simple, but yet just enjoyable for either as films or just as comedies. But like because now we don't even have that kind of opportunity to have comedy films or just some comic book like films. Even Kick-Ass like follows similar to Green Hornet in that way. Because I'm pretty sure it came around a close year, right?
Yeah, 2010. And
2010, yeah.
And I forgot the guy who made the story of Kick-Ass. Like, I have certain views on him, but I appreciate the fact that Kick-Ass was an identity of its own. Like, it was between the likes of the Avengers and the Dark Knight, and much like with Green Hornet and Hellboy, it stood out on its own. Like, it's not trying to be like a huge cinematic universe beginner, nor is it trying to be like a film with Easter eggs and fan service and adaptations galore. It's just its own thing. It's just Kick-Ass. Much like how Hellboy is Hellboy, and Green Hornet is Green Hornet. Nowadays, it's just something that we don't get very often.
And we will... Yeah, not in the case for anyone trying to attempt to simply just make a fun and enjoyable, but not too campy superhero-like film.
Exactamundo. And finally, we'll be taking a look at our plans for 2021. I kind of wish the other boys were around to see this, but I guess they'll have to find out about it much later. So, yeah. This will involve both our plans on the channel as well as our plans outside of the channel, like in some real life stuff we got in mind. Of course, don't ask us if 2021 will be better than 2020, because first of all, shut up, and second of all, we don't know yet. But one thing's for sure, there's a lot of stuff we have in mind for this year. Now, in terms of the JustUs Podcast, we got a lot of both topics to bring up as well as special episodes in mind. Would you like to hear them?
Good to see what is up. I mean, because like when it comes to 2021, I mean, I'll be even too busy, but I'll be having enough time, sometimes part-time for some episodes, so just as long as I'm always with some good stuff, and I'll be happy enough to try to be part of it.
That's why you're a part-timer. You're in a tag team with F-Dog.
Yeah.
But in terms of the plans we got for the JustUs Podcast, well, we got two special episodes in mind. First one would be the Snyder Cut episode, which, of course, we're very happy to talk about because it's a film we've been waiting for, and it's one of the first subject matters we typically had for the first episode. And I'm just so excited to finally, witness what we should have gotten back in November 2017. Now, that being said, we don't know when it's going to come out, but hopefully it'll be in March, and we'll be making sure that we'll make sure that the trailer is made for it. That's all that's important for us. Another special episode will be about the Fantastic Four on April 1st. And it's something I want to get done because not many people seem to give much attention to the Fantastic Four beyond just Fantastic was terrible. I wonder what the MCU Fantastic Four will be like. So, leave it to us on April 1st to make an episode about 4 superheroes in one family. In terms of subject matters for plenty of stuff we usually talk about, well, let's start off with Marvel Comics. Now, Captain America, the First Avenger, and Thor turned 10 this year, as well as X-Men First Class, and those are movies I want to revisit this year, which is great because I remember first watching them 10 years ago and feeling super happy that we have comic book movies that just felt like great stories. I mean, sure, Thor and the First Avenger were just like tie-ins to the Marvel Cinematic Universe's big film, The Avengers, but that was in the back of our heads. Like, it's coming, but it doesn't feel like it's rubbed into your face too much, and I miss that.
But since now we've already gone a long amount of years in the sense of how build up to the perfect crossover films will all come to play, like how we've gotten that experience from the first Avengers, and then even more so from like the sequels coming in. It's good to have some films. I mean, if you're lucky enough, if you're gonna have films that can get back to that level.
That's something we're going to talk about when it comes to the First Avenger and Thor. Now, I'd like to talk about Iron Man 1 and 2 as well as The Incredible Hulk, but some other time. As for First Class, I mean, like, that's a movie I kind of wanted to talk about because, like, the first X-Men movie I think holds up pretty much well, but I know for a fact that First Class is a film that might hold up even more because it's got this less is more approach than the first movie. Like, the first movie was all about action and getting us into knowing more about the world of the mutants in modern time, whereas First Class feels more like a back to basics approach. It's an origin story. It looks like a reboot, but still in the same universe. And it feels more character-driven.
If you must have an origin to an origin story.
Yep. And thankfully, I have like no preference, like no real preference to either one. Like, sure, my head would say that Michael Fassbender's Magneto works better because of his character arcs, but my heart would say that Ian McKellen's Magneto is better because of how much it means to me as a guy that's been around with comic book films since the 2000s. But both work.
If I would think about both, Magneto's both still hold to be well, and even from how they've tried to connect from Days of Future Past, it's good enough to see, even from how pretty much like kind of mismatched the timeline is for the X-Men films, like that most people can get, they still were able to hold up pretty well and bringing good connectivity between both. Not just them, even for Professor X also.
And honestly, I much prefer these older X-Men films than I do the new stuff like Dark Phoenix and the New Mutants. I mean, you already heard our thoughts on Dark Phoenix, I'm sure. But Dark Phoenix is one we've yet to talk about because I don't really want to, but one day I gotta. But let's just say it's not that good. In terms of an animated Marvel film, I want to talk about Planet Hulk because after seeing it on free on YouTube, I think it's a film that not many people would talk about unless it involves people mentioning that they wish Hulk would go back to being a monstrous badass instead of the loser that he is in the recent MCU films.
Okay, let's just go back. You said that it's free on YouTube?
Yes, it is free on YouTube. Might not be anymore, but like, it's like, yeah, I know, right? Like, it's like so good. It's like,
wait, why? No, like that kind of sounds disrespectful.
Like, okay, having it free on YouTube might sound like it's a bit, kind of like a bit of a way people look down on it, but I'd much rather watch the movie for free than pay money to watch Thor Ragnarok, a movie I don't like much, as well as it disrespecting Thor and Hulk.
I agree. That's true.
So yeah, that's definitely something I want to talk about. Because beyond just the Hulk being an actual badass in this sort of storyline, there's also other stuff you got to talk about, like the additional characters, the setting, and how pretty much the world saw Hulk in the planet that he was involved with. And I got to rewatch the movie and get a better understanding of it because, like, I saw it once, but I had to do other stuff at the time. But now I'll happily rewatch it again and give a much better review on it later in the channel, or the year, or the episode count, or whatever. Because these movies turn 5 years old this year, we'll be taking a look at, in terms of the rest of Marvel stuff, Deadpool, Captain America Civil War, X-Men Apocalypse, and Doctor Strange. Now, most people are going to be kind of hesitant to talk about Deadpool because some people wouldn't seem too confident with the way it's held up. In fact, I'm pretty sure some would say that it's kind of overrated or that the humor doesn't land anymore. But I think it's something worth giving recognition to because it's an R-rated movie that's been pretty successful. It's also got a lot of attention. It's got a lot of ambition. It didn't hold back with its shots. And I'd say that unlike Deadpool 2, it felt more fulfilling of a movie. Sure, you might think, it's got a lot of things that make it age poorly. And I will admit that it was kind of annoying when people act like it's the only good thing of 2016. I mean, there's other movies that were given more attention.
It wasn't. We know it wasn't. There's like 4, 5 reasons we can say. I'll say like one clearly. Batman vs Superman, Dawn of Justice, simple as that.
Spoiler alert! Don't spoil stuff. But what I'm trying to say is that like the first Deadpool movie, I think holds up pretty well, and I can't wait to talk about it on my review for next month with you guys. Now, Captain America Civil War, on the other hand, is kind of interesting because, like, I'm pretty sure you and everyone else would probably, like, be afraid of talking about it. But hey, it wouldn't hurt to at least, like, talk about how it aged poorly and how it's only there just so we can have, like, the MCU fans try to throw shit at BVS, right?
Yeah, I mean, because that was even from what we know, too, like, that was some of the main reasons behind just the making of the film was how, Marvel Studios' fear of what they thought BVS would have become. So, of course, they found a good way to exploit it. And then, I think with Jeff Johns even, like, leaking away from what BVS was and seeing as to how Civil War came, being the second superhero clash of rivals on rivals from the own team, pretty similar as how BVS was. So seeing how clearly the similarities come from both films being the year of superhero civil actions against each other, that it comes out pretty weird when thinking about it, but it's not surprising also.
But more importantly, it's also worth talking about so we can get our own thoughts of why other MCU films are better than it. Because I'll say this quickly so we won't ramble on about it too much, but I think whereas Age of Ultron felt like its own complete story, like not perfect, but it felt like it was a movie that you feel is planned out, Civil War feels more rushed. It feels weak. It feels poorly made. And the only things that's existing for, aside from trying to like get attention away from BVS, give us the attention to Spider-Man and treat like he's the best thing ever. But seeing how this Spider-Man character turned out over the years, I think he's aged poorly, worse than either Tobey Maguire and Andrew Garfield. And it's more than just nostalgia, people.
Mm-hmm.
And of course,
same thought too. Because even thinking about how we first saw from his presentation, or just his first impression that we got out of Tom becoming the character, we all thought of how strong that potential was going to be. And then the year right after with Homecoming, we know how that was like. We know how fun the MCU community had just with Tom being like probably like just people just praising him as the best Spider-Man to ever come on screen. Like the Spider-Man that Stan Lee has thought of since he's written him in the comics, which of course he still is because of the case of Spider-Man being a kid, because from most of the comics, he is a kid. He is a 15-year-old superhero, right? And then with what we've seen from both Toby and Andrew, they are the older Peter Parkers, but they still keep true from the characters themselves. Tom Holland just adds a little more just because of how it's a high school student, even though, yeah, both Toby and Andrew were also, but we see the Tom Holland Spider-Man as a high school student, even still continuing
I think
throughout the years.
Pump the brakes there and just say that we'll see if he's going to be any better or worse than how he's been in 2021 Spider-Man 3 movie, assuming it'll come out on Christmas.
And even assuming, continuing from what I said, if he is still gonna follow from his years or just time of being in Midtown High School.
Right, because I think this guy's just kind of an example of why we should not let the hype go crazy for us, since I don't think he's aged that well as a character. It's basically just him to exist so he can have the MCU, have Spider-Man. But I need the meat and potatoes to be good too.
Same thought too. Yeah, pretty much. I mean, because even from what it left off with Days of Future Past, there was a lot of hype coming into Apocalypse that everyone had before even just seeing the film. And even how the trailers had presented for Apocalypse becoming the truly overall threat compared to the sentient beings that was the Sentinels that we've seen them as, because they were a very strong threat, right, from traffic industries. And then seeing as to how Apocalypse was portrayed, like they kept close to the comic book adaptation, but yeah, it came off pretty off, in my opinion, from just the third act, because it was pretty over CG'd from most of the sequences. But yeah, they kept that because of how very supernatural Apocalypse was, and how well powered he kept from his own arsenal, from his own team. With
then again,
of course, yeah.
Then again, like most third acts in comic movies nowadays are like extremely CGI reliant. So
you're right. The most of them, pretty much, they're all extremely CG, and Apocalypse is just one among them.
Yeah, more on our thoughts on that later. And the same goes for Doctor Strange. Now, of course, we'll try and add more stuff regarding video games, because I know for a fact that Arkham City came out in 2011, so I want to talk about that too.
Yeah.
It's a pretty good game. Of course, many people prefer Arkham Knight or have a soft spot for Arkham Origins, but hey, got to get praise to like the second game.
Arkham Origins, because is there like plans for even from just the Arkham series? Is that all, Serge?
What I mean to say is the fact that Arkham City is the game that came out 10 years ago, and I want to give attention to it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, because there's still even attention given to it when it comes to like how well remembered the series was and how well it defined the genre.
But I got to say that of all the stuff that the Arkham games display, I think Arkham City definitely deserves more praise. But you are indeed correct that the Arkham series is an example of video games based on comic book properties that can prove that they're not just reliant on blockbuster films.
Yeah.
For the DC stuff, of course, Batman v Superman 5th Anniversary Revisit. You know how it's going to turn out, boys and girls. Same goes for Man of Steel as we prepare for the Snyder Cut event. Suicide Squad, on the other hand, is going to be a different story. Now, I don't know if we're going to get the Ayer cut or not this year. But if we do...
I hope to God we do. I hope that... because we know it's not greenlit yet, or like not even officially, and there's still a lot of sources still, even in talks of HBO Max will even consider. Like, they can have a plan for sure for Peacemaker, but they're not going to have any ideas for the Ayer cut.
Exactly.
Bull
I don't get
crap.
That.
Bull crap. I know for a fact the Ayer cut's coming up. I even have my own thoughts on it. I have my own theories on what could come through. We even, everyone even got, a little teaser or just a little clip from David himself of Jared's Joker.
Exactly. And,
that was just a hint.
That just seems a little more exciting than fucking John Cena or George Cease getting a series. Like, they're going to make a series about a character that most of these DCEU noobs aren't familiar with. But they're not going to give us a proper John Cena versus Bumblebee fight where John Cena's like his height and Bumblebee's a Camaro and they fight each other. Like, that's fucking disappointing, man. Like, fuck this world.
They're gonna do it because it's John Cena. It's on the level of The Rock. Like, if he's going to be coming in any kind of unique show or even just franchise, right? For example, the Fast Furious, right? The Rock, he comes in as Hobbs from Fast 5, and then Fast 6, Fast 7, and he's become so loved at that point that he just became such a total replacement for Vin Diesel when it comes to the big muscle coming in from the team, that he was able to have his own spin-off that we know was Hobbs and Shaw. So practically, it relates to that level for John Cena for Peacemaker. But yeah, we didn't see crap from anything with the Suicide Squad of everything for John Cena's portrayal of Peacemaker. That how even know how well the show's going to be itself on HBO Max.
Not that I want to see the Suicide Squad anyways, because there's other things I'm more interested in, but I just want to see John Cena be treated like a YTP character. You know, my time is up. I brush your ass with my coke, and then my time is up. George Cease, because I'm a Snake Gaiden fanboy, and I love Snake Gaiden's YTPs, and I want to see Billy Bob Tanley or Billy Bob Tannen, as well as Bubba Dunk Funkin', aka Bubba Dud Fuff, like, lose their shit over Cena. Hopefully the Suicide Squad Ayer cut gets made or is greenlit so we can see it. But if not, I guess we can talk about what worked and didn't work with the theatrical version of Suicide Squad.
Mm-hmm.
I'd also want to talk about why Batman the Killing Joke's animated movie sucks.
I haven't even seen that film ever since, when it came both digital and DVD, because I watched it pretty much on digital. First time seeing it, just like, it was just a no-show. The reason thinking about it was practically out of the Batman and Batgirl scene. Like, everyone knows it. We don't have to remind everyone.
Yeah.
Everything after pretty much, that actually became the Killing Joke and not what Bruce Timm had attended for an extended story arc following for Batgirl, which was unnecessary, even though I guess he wanted to for the sake of just Batgirl. Everything was pretty good in the sake of the animated film out of the adaptation of the book so far. Yep. It was pretty good.
But it taught me three things. One, Kevin Conroy and Mark Hamill don't make something good all the time. Two, I don't think of Batgirl as a character I want to get turned on about, because with fictional characters that are female, I try to be modest with them in some ways, if it makes sense. Like with Princess Peach, for example, I try to see her respectfully. With Wonder Woman, I see her respectfully. I try not to think of dirty thoughts like how Joss Whedon did. Same thing goes for Mary Jane. She's Peter's, she's not ours. But I was kind of disgusted with how they treated Batgirl. Just the way they try to make her sexualized just seems so unusual. I'm more used to Batgirl being more of a cut clean character. If you want to do something like that, do it with Supergirl for all you care. But Batgirl just doesn't jive well with me. And it's kind of shitty that it's Bruce Timm. And third of all, Bruce Timm is a horny motherfucker. So yeah, I can't wait to give this movie a new asshole. It's a piece of shit. I don't know if that movie or Batman versus Harley Quinn is worse. Oh boy.
Yeah. I pretty much watched Batman vs. Harley Quinn the same amount as The Killing Joke. One time only. I could watch second time if I just have a feeling of the day, I really don't give a crap about anything, and I just say, F it, let's just see this movie just for the sake of seeing it. I would.
Yep. And why not? Let's also make a review on The Dark Knight Returns, both the animated movie and the novel.
Oh my god.
Anything else that's going to pop up that was made 10 years ago, 5 years ago, 15, 20, 30, 35 years ago. We'll see it. If it's not listed here, it may be added in this sort of future episode. We'll see. Who knows? You can quote me on that.
Quoted.
For other stuff we want to talk about with Transformers, main subject matters are going to be Beast Wars, because it turns 25 this year. The 1986 Transformers movie turns 35 this year. Dark of the Moon turns 10 this year. Robots in Disguise 2001 turns 10
Wow,
this year.
that's a lot of Transformers celebration. I already know in my mind about just Dark of the Moon. I forgot that even from the original '86 movie was 35 years ago. Wow, that's crazy.
But that's not the only stuff we're going to talk about. Like, we got War for Cybertron game. We've got stuff like Robots in Disguise 2015, the sequel to Prime. There's even like a discussion regarding the Prime Wars trilogy, which is like sort of like War for Cybertron, Siege, and Earthrise and Kingdom, but differently made. We also got Kingdom showing up, and there may or may not be talks about reviews on Revenge of the Fallen and Cybertron. We'll see how it turns out. But first off, I'm going to say that I'm really excited to finally share my thoughts on Dark of the Moon. It's my favorite Transformers movie of all time. And I'm just
by far, Serge, same feeling. It's just so much we can just resemble and reflect on how well and how at least that's where Michael Bay was probably at his best. Besides the first, because if you were Serge, if you were to say out of your favorite, like if you were to choose two films, right, throughout the whole franchise of the Bayverse, what would you say was?
My favorites would be like Dark of the Moon, then behind it, the first movie, then behind it, Age of Extinction, then fourth place, Revenge of the Fallen, fifth place, The Last Night, and sixth place, Bumblebee. Because
that's pretty much my rating.
Like the first movie and Dark of the Moon, mostly Dark of the Moon, just feel like peak Transformers material, like the best they got. They're like nearly flawless to perfect. Age of Extinction and Revenge of the Fallen are good films, but they feel a little more like, well, Revenge of the Fallen feels a bit incomplete. Age of Extinction is bigger, it's more exciting, it's got Dinobots, but I prefer the story of Dark of the Moon. I'm not too huge on the sort of like soft reboot approach. Like, it's not bad, but I feel kind of alienated, but nowhere near as alienated as 80s babies were with the 86 movie when all the other characters died. The Last Night, I hate it because it's so rushed. Like, it tries to be this big movie, a big conclusion, but it doesn't know what it wants to be. And Bumblebee?
It doesn't.
Bumblebee is like straight up garbage for trying to be obsessed with the 80s nostalgia people that didn't even like Michael Bay in the first place. So they try to win him over with all this G1 residue, and it's just stupid. Oh boy.
Yeah, pretty close. That's pretty close to me.
And
I mean, I think Bumblebee, like similar, but like, I wouldn't think of it just like I still think of it as too overcamping, too much pushy in the sense of bringing to the G1 era. But I mean, like even just if you just exclude from like how it try to take a lot out of like the G1 sense and just bring it as to how much of the story focus was it was decent. I mean, if you compare that to the Bayverse films, from each one from 1 to 5.
The problem with Bumblebee is the fact that it like copied too much of the 80s movies, and it like mimics identity and tries to make an identity of its own, which it's like trying to copy E.T. It tried to copy all those other films about a 80s protagonist meeting an 80s alien, but in CGI, and it's just pretty dull.
It's dull and it's practically copy pasta. Like even with what they did, it's better kind of relationship that Haley Steinfeld's character and Bumblebee had compared to
she's
Sam.
Like the only good thing in that movie, but John Cena did not like take his shirt off and reveal he's part of the C Nation. So fuck Bumblebee's movie. We didn't get a John Cena versus Bumblebee movie in WWE. So what the fuck we're talking about? Let's move on. Beast Wars. Beast Wars. I love Beast Wars so much. Like, I love the characters. Like, they feel like real characters. Like, I like that Rat Trap's an asshole. I like that Cheetor matured over time. I like that Optimus Primal is like Optimus Prime, his ancestor, but he's like a little more flawed. I like Rhinox, how he's a big brute that's also smart. He's also known for like defeating the Predacons at one point by letting out a massive fart from eating beans from that Energon disease that he had. But the Predacons are even better, like Megatron especially. Like he's so cold, he's so sinister. I like when he goes out and says yes when he's making his plans. David Kaye's performance is just beautiful. Waspinator is funny. I mean, I like when he like does his like lips. I like when he gets blown up. I like when he like gets angry about being treated like shit because the universe hates him. Although I love him a lot, like the world loves him. Of course, the CGI is old but still good. The music is pretty heavy metal rock. Like, it's not heavy metal; it's like rock and roll, which is pretty good. I like the story. Like it's got G1 characters in season 3 mostly because it's like a sequel to G1, but unlike the fan service we get nowadays, it's important. It's part of the story. Like it's not just hey guys, hey all you '80s Facebook man babies. Like here's Earthrise, a cartoon that's mediocre, but you only like it because of the nostalgia. Like Beast Wars treated the G1 characters as a story plot. Like the Maximal's got to protect the '84 Autobots and Decepticons from damage, or else time would get messed up. And speaking of nostalgia, the '86 movie, well, it's the best looking G1 related thing, but I don't think it's that good because it's mostly just a toy commercial. They kill off old characters, they try to make money off of it, and it alienated fans, and like people nowadays try to like it because like that's all they care about. But I remember back when I first saw like people their thoughts on it on TF Wiki. Like TF Wiki mentioned that critics hated it. They made fun of Unicron. They made fun of like how it's a toy commercial, and they also made fun of the fact that parents just like left the theaters with their kids when the kids were crying about Optimus Prime dying. Yeah, that was real, and
Wow.
like sure it's messed up. Like sure I might sound like an asshole for like shitting on the movie, but if people can get away with like sending death threats to Michael Bay over putting flames on Optimus's body, then it's okay for me to criticize a movie that's not even that good, but only people like it just because it's G1, which that's for another day, like later in the year. But yeah, a lot of stuff to talk about Transformers. And with Power Rangers, well, we got Dino Fury coming up this year. I'm going to split it up in 4 parts. We're going to first talk about the pilot, then the first few episodes before the hiatus, then the second half, and rinse and repeat with Season 2 if we get Season 2 for Dino Fury. As for other seasons that showed up earlier, I want to review Samurai because it turned 10, Time Force because it turned 20, Mystic Force because it turned 15, Zeo because it turned 25, and I also want to review Dino Charge because it turned 5 to 6 this like in the past few years. But you know what this means? This means that you can definitely hear my thoughts on different parts of the Power Ranger season. Like you might think most of this stuff is the same, but I'm going to say this right off the bat. Zeo is different from Mystic Force and SPD, which I always wanted to talk about SPD. Like, Zeo is different from Time Force. Time Force is mostly similar to SPD and Mystic Force in terms of tone and story and writing, most importantly. But those 3 seasons, Time Force, SPD, and Mystic Force, are different from Samurai because most people would assume that it's like all the same writing, but like Zeo felt like it was moving away from MMPR. It feels like a more refined MMPR, like a sequel to MMPR. It feels like it's much more better. It's like better written. It feels more like ambitious. Doesn't feel too reliant on the nostalgia of Mighty Morphin. Like we got new suits for crying out loud. Whereas Time Force was like a maturely written season. It's also got like topical stuff about like how Rangers would handle their responsibilities. SPD is like a cop show with a comic book influence to it. And Mystic Force was more dark magic in some ways. It's like kind of like Harry Potter, but instead of like the whimsical nature of the movies, like it feels more like Harry Potter's more recent stuff mixed with Power Rangers when it was not like trying to talk down to kids. Because Mystic Force is a good season. I'll get to that more later on, but like I like that in SPD because they feel like kids shows that older people can watch and revisit and still enjoy. Whereas Samurai, I can't say the same thing for Samurai because it's almost like it's more like something you'd expect to watch as a kid and like at that time before you revisit it and not like it so much because how aged badly, or how it aged badly rather.
I wouldn't know because like I mean like for a while like I've seen like I didn't see pretty often from like back when I had Netflix and then I would see some the lineups of the Power Rangers shows. Cause, wait, isn't some of the Power Rangers shows going to be taken off from Netflix now?
Yeah, unfortunately, which sucks because I wanted to like enjoy Zeo, but mostly in Space to RPM because those seasons are the best. Like that's like those seasons are from when the show began to grow along with the audience. And now we're going to be stuck with the overrated Mighty Morphin, the terrible Ninja Steel, and the decent but not great Beast Morphers. And don't get me wrong, I like Beast Morphers, but it's no Time Force, it's no In Space, it's no Ninja Storm, Dino Thunder, or SPD. You know why? Because the characters in Beast Morphers aren't as well written as they are in Dino Thunder, for example. Yeah. And you and everyone else is going to be in for a treat when it comes to me venting about how good PR used to be, how ambitious the series felt, as well as me talking about why Samurai is a mixed bag, and Dino Fury pretty much feeling more like either something good or something that's the same stuff we've gotten in the past. We'll see. In terms of other stuff we want to talk about, probably talk about some Pirates of the Caribbean stuff. I mean, why not? Give some attention to that series. It deserves it. Give some attention to V for Vendetta or Constantine. I wouldn't mind giving attention to a series like Jimmy Neutron, because this movie turns 10 this year, as far as I can remember. Or not 10.
Oh, the actual movie of Jimmy Neutron?
Yeah, I think this movie turns 29. Like I keep on getting it confused with the Blu-ray release. Does it have a Blu-ray release? I don't know. Like, there's so much stuff we want to talk about. And we've already rambled a lot about podcast topics. In terms of stuff outside of the JustUs Podcast, I want to do 2 additional series. Like, Prince will pretty much be like a Dolan Spooderman style series of videos that involve Trump, Obama, Bill Clinton, and George H.W. Bush, like having floating heads and using text-to-speech voices and doing stupid stuff together. It may also include other people like Hillary Clinton, maybe Boris Johnson, and other world leaders. We'll see. But as for the other series, TCAP Talks, I am inspired by the likes of Fast Eddie and Walls for doing commentaries on To Catch a Predator. Now, you've seen To Catch a Predator before, right?
A little bit. I mean, like, isn't that similar to Chris Hansen?
TCAP is Chris Hansen. I mean,
okay.
Like, I'm Chris
Hansen.
Hansen.
Because when I said that, I was thinking, wait a minute. I put two of them together. Chris Hansen, Cat's Predator, Daylight NBC.
Yes.
Yeah.
Now, I can't wait to talk about the series of Predators. Now, the way it works is it will be like JustUs Podcast, but you guys can, like, it doesn't have to be all 4 members at once. Like, you can all take turns. It could be like 2 guys joining me, 1 guy joining me in the talk. But I share you my screen where you see the clips and we share our thoughts on what the Predators do. And the first episode, spoiler alert, will be about Donald Morrison. Now, when they'll be put out on YouTube, we'll see. But hopefully Perverted Justice or Tetrad Core or even Chris Hansen tries to go after us because I love To Catch a Predator. I want to share my thoughts on the Predators themselves beyond just YouTube comments. Other stuff for YouTube, stop motions, more memes. We'll see how it turns out. As for getting stuff done for 2021, I want to graduate this year from my college. I just want to get done with it because I'm not going to go into too many details, but I hate my current university. Like, the past university I had was just so much better. The first university I ever had was like perfect for what it is. It felt more welcoming, it felt more helpful. The second university, like, it's a bit more expensive, but it's decent. And I know like those were before the quarantine took place, like from the coronavirus pandemic. I know this was before we got all the crazy people with like crazy ass points of views trying to force them on others. But I just miss when college was more convincing, like nowhere near as like frightening as cartoons made it seem. So that's one thing. I also want to try and go to a wedding of a specific friend, and hopefully, if it takes place in Canada, then hopefully you and I can meet each other in person. I wish we can say the same thing about the other members of the JustUs podcast, but hey, maybe one day. And of course,
If there's a chance.
Yep. And of course, just try and make the rest of 2021 good. And that's all we got to say about this episode. What a lot to talk about.
Allow for a good future for films. Allow for good futures for us in the world, hopefully, including films, and for the sake of life, for the sake of improvement. And it'll be for a good time for whatever the future episodes hold up for us with those plans.
Yep. And hopefully the IGDCEU page will expand its merchandise and give us stuff for the Just Us Podcast merchandise. Hopefully with shirts that say "fuck the scalpers." And that does it for today, boys and girls. I hope you enjoyed this episode. We'll see you next time.